Now you're watching Gearz.
Now you're watching Gearz.
You know, one question that I get asked a lot is, what is the biggest, most massive rig that you've ever seen? I mean, is it a monster truck or a big rig, piece of construction equipment? What is it? Well, that's an interesting question because those are all big rigs, but you're not thinking big enough. No, the biggest rig that I've ever seen on four wheels was a military vehicle called the Larc. But no, this isn't it. No, the Larc is big enough to eat this thing whole. Now, Larc, or L.A.R.C, stood for Lighter Amphibious Resupply Cargo. And this thing stands over 17 feet tall, is roughly 30 feet wide, and 70 to 80 feet long, depending on where you measure from.
This is for you bling bling guys. We got a 51-inch rim. That's like 9 feet tall and 3.5 feet wide. I have got to get a set of these for a project.
Why so big, you ask? Well, basically the Larc is a barge with wheels, designed to take massive loads of equipment like tanks and trucks from ships, sail across the water, crash through a rough breaking surf, and dump the stuff on beaches that were inaccessible any other way. These were used extensively in Vietnam.
You better hold on.
Now, at this point, you're probably wondering, where on earth do you find something like this? And where do you drive it at? Well, this particular one is sitting at the Lane Motor Museum in Nashville, Tennessee, where they restore and display all kinds of unique vehicles, including the Larc.
I was always intrigued by them, but I thought, you know, one, we'd never be able to afford it, and two, even if we could afford it, could you get it to the museum? Because, I wasn't interested in something you couldn't have at the museum. And actually, they had to pick it up with a crane to get it on land, and the first pickup, the first company wasn't successful. They had the cranes all set up, they went to pick it up, and they couldn't pick it up. So we had to have another company with a bigger crane come pick it up.
Okay, from a nuts and bolts standpoint, what does it take to move a rig that can weigh over 150 tons fully loaded and is the size of a house? Well, you guessed it, diesel power, and a lot of it. The Larc has 4 GMC diesel engines, one for each tire, and they run through 4 transmissions, 12 gearboxes, 2 air compressors, 8 hydraulic pumps, and 2 dynamos. And that provides the power to make this thing move at a lumbering 15 miles an hour on land and about 7 miles an hour in the water. The steering is an engineering marvel. You have massive hydraulic rams that push and pull those big earth mover-sized tires. Now, of course, you have steering front and rear, and you've got a unique dual yoke that allows you to steer the front and rear tires together or totally independent of each other, making the Larc fairly maneuverable, provided you can see where you're going.
I have no idea where we're going. I can't see squat out of this thing.
This is where your spotters are really important.
Oh, this is awesome, man.
Now, with all this destruction going on, we begin to wonder just what would happen if the Larc encountered a real obstacle, like, say, a car. Could it hold its own with the monster trucks? Yeah, it does. Matter of fact, the Lark will lay a car out flatter than anything you've ever seen. So you don't want to forget to set the parking brake on this sucker.
Was there anything worth salvaging?
Oh, yeah, look at this. The turn signal, it's still here in the gas cap.
Yeah, the gas cap.
The gas cap is still good. This probably pains you, Michael, since you're from Germany, to see an NSU being annihilated in America, huh?
Well, hopefully that gives you an idea of what it's like to drive one of the most massive four-wheel vehicles ever built. This is a phenomenal piece of engineering. I wonder how long it'll take us to get to Memphis in this thing. Oh yeah, you're going with me. You know, one question that I hear a lot is, what is the most important part of your project? Is it the wheels and tires? Is it the axles and suspension? Is it the motor choice? Is it the paint job and the colors? Well, now, these are all important things, but the most important thing is your frame, because that is what everything else mounts to. And if you don't get this right, if you don't get it strong, you're gonna have some serious problems down the road. Now, since most hot rod and 4x4 projects are going to require some sort of framework, we're going to take a look at how to approach it, some of the tools and techniques involved, so you can build something really strong that isn't going to turn into a pretzel on you. Now, what I've done on Sergeant Rock here, in true bigger is better fashion, is take these huge Rockwell axles, the springs and the hangers from a 2.5-ton military truck, and graft them onto the frame of a 1941 half-ton military truck. So as you can see, we have got some major strength issues going on already. The original 1941 frame comes forward, tapers down, and ends right here. So I had to hand fabricate all of this to support the front of the truck. And this is very strong. However, this little weeny original frame is not very strong. Here's how we're going to fix the problem. The first thing we're going to do is deal with these areas where the frame gets narrow, because that is obviously a weak spot. Using a straight edge, we'll make a template to bridge the area. Then transfer that to some strong 2x4 1/4-inch wall square tubing and cut it out. Yeah, this frame is going to be stout. And since the metal is so thick and the cuts are uneven, a plasma cutter is the best tool to use here. Now just grind and trim and fit until you have the piece fitting like a glove. Acrobatics here. Hello. Once you have the cardboard train to protect your paint and not fall on your head, weld the new pieces in. All right, we got these top pieces welded in place, so we're done, right? Oh, man, we're only halfway there. No, we got to do something here on the bottom where the frame tapers too. So we're going to start back here. I'm going to run a piece all the way up here to this front support. And we're going to do it pretty much the same way that we did the top. Fortunately, the bottom frame rail cuts were even enough so I could use the bandsaw, which makes a lot less mess than the plasma cutter. Okay, basically what we're doing here is building a solid 6-inch tall frame right through this critical area where we're going to need all the strength that we can get. Now, I know some of you guys are going, wait a minute. Don't you have to box an open channel frame to give it strength? Well, yeah, just a minute, we're going to get to that. Before you box a frame, you need to come in and weld up any of these holes you're not going to use, and you need to do a little bit of pre-planning here. Any body parts, fenders, anything that bolt to the frame that have a nut that go on the back side, you have got to go in, weld a nut so it's captive, before you box the frame, because if you don't do that, when you get ready to assemble the vehicle when you're all done, you are going to have a heck of a problem. Welcome back to Gearz, where we are doing some heavy-duty framework on Sergeant Rock there. Now, why is that important? Well, it doesn't matter what you're working on, whether it's a 4x4 or a street machine or a street rod. The frame has got to be strong. And since you don't really know what you've got until you get into it, well, it's up to you to make it strong and fit your application. So that's what we're showing you. Some of the tools, some of the techniques to help you do that. Now, we are finally ready to box the frame. So to make your pieces, take a piece of cardboard, slide it in place, and then just tap down the edge of the frame. Make yourself a nice outline of the piece that you need to make. Once again, transfer the shape to some steel plate and cut it out. Now I'm using really thick 3/8" steel plate to give me the strength that I'm gonna need. It's a good thing that I have a fresh blade in the bandsaw. Now, before you get all excited and just run over there and weld these plates in, you need to slow down a little bit here. One trick to working with thick steel like this is to cut a bevel into the edge. Don't just leave it straight. Now what this will do is allow you to sink that weld down into the heart of this steel. Gives you better penetration, better strength, and very little grinding when you get ready to finish it off. Now, at this point, what we've got is a really nice version of the Frankenstein monster going here, because we got welds and seams going all over the place. Man, it looks like a bunch of zippers. All we need is a couple of bolts sticking out the side. But we're gonna smooth all this down to where you won't even be able to tell that this surgery happened. So grab a grinder and let's go. Well, there it is. Now that is turning into a frame that we can use. This boy is going to be strong. Now obviously, guys, doing framework like this is very time consuming, it's messy, it's very involved, but you gotta do it. If you're gonna take your project to the next step, you gotta do it. And the next step now is putting in the motor, building the motor mounts, because finally, we have got a frame that is strong enough to handle that. Now, those of you that don't know might be thinking, a 6-inch tall frame, boxed? That's huge. What kind of engine's going in here? Well, just because everything is all smoothed down and it doesn't look like Frankenstein anymore, doesn't mean that there is not a monstrous engine getting ready to go in Sergeant Rock. But not for today. That's for another show.
If you're itching to get out and do something with your car or truck, fire it up and bring your family to one of the Gearz Autoamas. There'll be cool vehicles, a silent auction, giveaways, and of course, a tour of the amazing Gearz shop with Stacey as he shares what goes on behind the scenes. You'll even get a chance to talk to him about what you're working on. So saddle up and put the pedal down to Nashville, Tennessee and the Gearz Autoama. For dates, times, and registration, go to the events page at staceydavid.com.
You know, a few years ago, when I started the Sergeant Rock project, not everybody could see the incredible potential in this old 1941 Dodge Power Wagon that I pulled out of a field. Now granted, it didn't look like much, but as soon as I set it up on those 50-inch tall IROCs and those Rockwell axles, and revealed the connection between the legendary World War II bomber, the Memphis Belle, well, things got pretty crazy. Unfortunately, when the Belle was shipped off to the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, the twin .50 caliber machine guns they loaned me went with it. But that's okay, because those were non-functional. What I've got now is so much better. They're so cool, you're not gonna believe it. Now, if you've ever thought about putting a gun on your rig for display, or for rush hour traffic, or for visiting the mother-in-law, or if you've ever wondered how they do those wild shootouts in the movies, you're about to find out. Now, obviously, you can't just drive around with real guns bristling all over the vehicle. As much as you'd like to, you can't. No, you gotta get some replicas. But not all replicas are created equal. And if you want the best, you gotta go to Iraq. No, not that Iraq. No, it's Iraq Inc., IRAC, and they specialize in machine gun replicas. Check it out. Now, what you're looking at are Iraq's replicas of the big 50 caliber machine guns that we put on tanks and trucks back in World War II, all the way up to today. Check these out. These are awesome. They got the big barrels on them, and the cooling tubes, and the sights, the action works, all the way back to the triggers. I mean, these are spot on replicas. But the big surprise comes when you open the breech. Now, notice that there is no action in there. But what are all these tubes and these tanks and stuff? Aha! These are made to fire, but not bullets. No, these fire a combination of propane and oxygen. So they look and sound exactly like the real thing. I mean, I'm talking flame out the end and full automatic, the whole deal. I mean, the only real difference is you're not gonna flame your neighbor's minivan if you trigger these off in the neighborhood. Now, you'll get his attention. You might make him have to change his shorts, but that may not be a bad thing. Have I got your attention? That's what I thought. All right, let's hook these things up. Now, like I said before, to make these things fire, you need a mixture of propane and oxygen. So you're gonna need a tank of both of those. Now, the oxygen, pick that up at a welding shop. The propane, you can get that anywhere. However, before you leave the welding shop, you need to make sure that you've got the proper hoses and the regulators and the fittings to hook everything up. For example, I'm using 2 guns, so I need double the hose and these Y connectors to make my connections. Also, make sure that you're using flashback arresters for oxygen and propane. Now, basically what these do is keep the fire going out the end of the barrel instead of coming back down the hose, which of course would make you have to change your shorts. So these are very important. Now, once you got all your stuff, just make your hookups. Stinky.
Thank you, Craig.
Thanks a lot. The last hookup is for power, and that's just a matter of hooking the 2 wires to a battery with a supplied harness. Now, all you have to do is turn on the gas, set the pressures, and pull the triggers. Yeah! And by adjusting the gas pressure, you can make the guns sound exactly like you want them to. Fire in the hole. This has got to be one of the coolest things I've seen in a long time. And it's the kind of stuff that the movie world uses, which explains why the hero never dies. Now, it may not be real, but it sure looks that way.
And now, Tool Tech, brought to you by Dake. If you have the dream, we have the tools.
You know, a few weeks ago, I cut some old, nasty, rusty body panels off of Ted Nugent's old Zebra Bronco and replaced it with new metal. And one of the tools that I used was called a spot weld cutter. Well, since that time, I've gotten a lot of requests and a lot of emails, people wondering, where do I get those things and how do they actually work? And that's what we're going to deal with today on Tool Tech. Now, most people realize that in just about any vehicle ever built, the bodies are put together with a series of spot welds, like these. And basically, you have an outer panel, a rocker, quarter, whatever it may be, that is spot welded to an inner panel. Now, the trick is to remove the outer panel without destroying the inner panel. Now, you could take a drill and just drill through each one of those, but you would put holes in the inner panel that would have to be repaired. That's no good. That is where a spot weld cutter comes in. Now, there's a lot of different styles of spot weld cutters out there, and they'll all do the job, but my favorites are called the Rotabroach. You can get them from our buddies at Cornwell Tools. Now, basically, these are really small, tiny hole saws. All you do is pick the one that's going to cover the size of spot weld you need to cut, and then just screw it onto the shaft. The spring-loaded pin in the center keeps the tool from moving around on you. And all you do is just push down and start cutting. Once you cut through the top panel, stop. Because you don't want to cut through the bottom panel. And that is really all there is to it. All you have to do now is take a grinder and knock off those little tips, and you are ready to spot weld a new panel right down on there. Now, what about the part that came off? Well, that comes off so clean that it's actually reusable. And that is why taking a spot weld cutter to a junkyard is such a great thing if you are looking for old body parts. They not only come off clean, they've already got the holes to spot weld it back on. And that is why having the right tool is so important. Hey, thanks for hanging with us on Gearz today. Next week, we're taking out one of the most valuable, sought-after, rare muscle cars ever built. And we promised the owner that we would treat it with loving care and not scratch it.